A businessman sees his company crumble without understanding where he is going wrong. When all seems lost, something unexpected appears on his desk. Without knowing where it came from, he decides to follow those risky guidelines. And what happens next begins to change everything in a surprising way. If this beautiful story of overcoming and love interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us from which city you are watching us. Continuing. Night was falling over Avenida Paulista when Rafael Almeida parked his black Mercedes in the basement of the corporate building. 38 years old, with dark hair and a few premature grey strands, he turned off the engine and sat there, his hands gripping the steering wheel. The silence of the parking lot was deafening. 3 generations. The company had spanned 3 generations of the Almeida family. His grandfather had founded it in the 60s, his father had expanded it in the 90s, transforming it into one of São Paulo's leading strategic consultancies. And now, under his management, everything was falling apart. Rafael closed his eyes and took a deep breath. The numbers didn't lie. In the last 18 months, the company had lost 40% of its revenue. Old clients were not renewing contracts. Almeida and Associados was becoming irrelevant. He had a top-tier team on paper, directors with international MBAs, consultants with impressive resumes, endless meetings, PowerPoint presentations, plans that failed. It was as if everyone was solving the wrong problems. Rafael went up to the 12th floor. The building was almost empty. It was past 8 in the evening. He entered his office and threw his briefcase on the desk. More bad reports, more evidence that he was failing. His cell phone vibrated. It was Marcela, his sister. "We need to talk about the company," Rafael typed an evasive reply. Marcela was right, but she didn't understand the pressure. It wasn't just a company. It was the legacy of their father, who had died 5 years ago. It was the promise Rafael had made to take care of everything. And he was failing. 20 floors below, Marina Silva was changing out of her navy blue cleaning crew uniform. 32 years old, with brown skin and black hair tied in a bun, she put her bag in the metal locker. Another night of work was beginning. Marina carried a secret. Since she was 19, she had cultivated a peculiar habit. She read everything she found: reports on desks, business books, presentations left open on computers. Over time, it became an obsession. She had no university degree. She had barely finished high school at a public school on the outskirts, needing to work to help her sick mother and 2 younger brothers. But she had a sharp, analytical mind and an almost instinctive ability to see patterns where others saw only chaos. Over 13 years of working in dozens of different companies, Marina had developed a deep understanding of how the corporate world functioned. She understood strategy, management, marketing, finance. All self-taught, all built in the gaps between one clean desk and another, in stolen minutes, reading reports that others discarded. Almeida and Associados had been her workplace for almost 2 years. In recent months, she had observed with a mixture of restlessness and frustration the silent collapse unfolding on those floors of glass and marble. She saw everything. She saw clients leaving meetings disappointed, their poorly disguised expressions of those who hadn't found what they were looking for. She saw the team repeating worn-out formulas, confident in methodologies that the market no longer valued, stuck in a mental model that simply didn't work anymore. She saw Rafael Almeida arriving earlier and earlier, and leaving later and later, with that expression of a man carrying the world on his back, his shoulders stooped under the weight of a legacy that threatened to crumble. And she saw with crystal clarity exactly what was wrong. The company was disconnected. Simple as that. Disconnected from the clients, disconnected from the market, disconnected from the reality pulsing outside. The team lived in a bubble of corporate jargon and academic theories, offering standardized solutions when clients were screaming for personalization, for something that actually solved their specific problems. The abyss between what Almeida and Associados offered and what the market truly needed grew every day. Marina knew this because she had access to information that no one imagined she processed. While emptying trash cans, she read discarded emails that revealed client frustrations. While cleaning meeting tables, she memorized notes scribbled on post-its and caught conversations that others deemed unimportant. It wasn't espionage. It was simply impossible not to see when you were present, but invisible. when people spoke freely around you as if you didn't exist. The biggest client was dissatisfied because they wanted quick solutions to survive the next quarter, not 2-year restructurings that looked pretty on paper. The startup that cancelled their contract left because traditional methodologies didn't apply to their agile model of accelerated growth. But she would never be heard. Who was she? A cleaner, invisible to everyone's eyes in that bright corporate world. Her opinion had no value in that universe where degrees and surnames counted more than actual ability. If she tried to speak, she would be ignored at best, ridiculed at worst, turned into a hallway anecdote, so she remained in silence, performing her work with the discreet efficiency expected of her, keeping to herself all those observations, all that analysis that accumulated in her mind like water held back by a dam about to break. Until one night, everything changed. It was a Thursday around 11 at night. Marina was on the 12th floor, wiping down the desks in the administrative area. Raphael was still in his office, the light on cutting through the darkness of the empty floor. She could see him through the glass walls sitting at his desk, his head in his hands, the perfect image of a defeated man, of someone carrying an impossible burden. Something inside her broke at that moment. Perhaps it was empathy from seeing another human being suffering, perhaps frustration from witnessing so much waste, so much potential being thrown away by blindness and pride, perhaps simply the visceral need to make her voice heard, even anonymously, to prove to herself that her mind had value. Marina couldn't explain exactly what led her to act, but when she got home that early morning, after taking 2 crowded buses to the Zona Leste where she lived with her mother in a small apartment in a housing project, she couldn't sleep. She sat at the small Formica kitchen table, opened the old laptop she had bought used a few years ago at a second-hand computer shop, and began to write. She wrote about everything she had observed: the disconnection between the company and its clients, the need to abandon rigid methodologies and embrace personalization, specific cases without mentioning names, but with enough detail so that whoever read it would recognize them, the urgency of rebuilding relationships, listening more than talking, adapting instead of imposing. She wrote for 3 hours until the sky brightened. When she finished, she had 4 pages of analysis, more complete than any report the team had produced in months. Marina reread it, corrected it, refining the arguments. Then she printed it at a LAN house, using plain paper with no identification. The following night she arrived half an hour early. She waited for the floor to be empty. With her heart racing and trembling hands, she entered Raphael's office and placed the letter in the center of the desk. Then she left quickly without looking back. She spent the rest of the night trying to calm her anxiety. It was madness. It was risky. But it was done. Raphael arrived at the office the next morning with the familiar feeling of weight on his shoulders. He had slept poorly. He entered his office, threw his jacket over the chair, and went to make some coffee. When he returned, he noticed the folded paper. He frowned. He wasn't expecting anything there. Curious, he picked up the sheets and began to read. The first few lines made him stop breathing. It was an analysis of his company, devastatingly precise, cruelly honest but constructive. Whoever had written it knew Almeida and Asociados from the inside. They knew the clients, the problems, the flaws that the team refused to admit. But it offered solutions, not generic or theoretical ones, but practical, specific, applicable paths. Raphael read it 3 times in a row, unable to put it down. It was as if someone had organized the chaos in his mind and returned it all structured, transformed into possible action. He felt exposed and, at the same time, deeply understood. Who had written this? He called his secretary. She denied any knowledge. He asked the directors. No one knew. Some were curious, others suspicious, but all denied authorship. Raphael considered it might be someone from the outside, but the level of internal knowledge was too great. For days the letter stayed in his mind. He reread it constantly, made notes in the margins, compared it with his own diagnoses. And the more he analyzed it, the more convinced he became. Those recommendations made sense. They were exactly what the company needed. Then, in a decision that surprised everyone, Raphael called an extraordinary meeting with the board of directors and announced changes. Without revealing the source, he presented a new strategy based on the recommendations of the anonymous letter. There would be resistance, but he was willing to face it. And the results appeared almost immediately. A client who was going to cancel renewed for another year after the new personalized approach. A proposal drafted following the letter's guidelines was accepted against 3 larger competitors. Small victories, but concrete ones, which the company hadn't seen in a long time. Raphael felt a strange gratitude for that anonymous voice that had appeared out of nowhere to save him. He wanted to say thank you, to meet the person, but more than that, he hoped it wasn't an isolated event. And it wasn't. 3 weeks later, when he arrived in the morning, he found a second letter on his desk. This time, the analysis was even deeper, focused on issues the first had only mentioned. The anonymous voice was back, and it continued to guide him through the storm that threatened to destroy everything he had promised to protect. The routine at Almeida and Associados began to change in subtle but perceptible ways. Raphael implemented the recommendations from the letters with a determination that surprised even his closest collaborators. He cancelled contracts with suppliers who added no real value. He restructured entire teams, putting the right people on the right projects, regardless of established hierarchies. Most importantly, he began to truly listen to clients, not just in formal meetings full of empty formalities, but in frank conversations about what they really needed. Internal resistance was significant at first. Directors accustomed to operating a certain way for years did not easily accept the changes. Some saw the new guidelines as an affront to their competence. Others simply didn't understand why they should abandon methods that had once worked. Raphael faced tough questioning, tense meetings where he had to defend decisions without being able to fully reveal his sources. But he stood firm because the numbers didn't lie. For the first time in 2 years, the downward curve was beginning to stabilize. Marina followed everything from her invisible post. She saw the changes happening, saw the company breathing again, and she felt something strange growing inside her, a mixture of pride and melancholy. Pride because her intelligence was finally making a difference, because her ideas were saving jobs, saving a legacy. Melancholy because she continued to be just the cleaner, invisible to everyone's eyes, including the man whose life she was transforming. The third letter came a month after the second. Marina had noticed that Raphael didn't just read her recommendations, but implemented them seriously. This encouraged her to go deeper. This time she wrote about leadership issues, about how he needed to rebuild the team's trust, about the importance of admitting mistakes and creating a culture where people felt safe to innovate and eventually fail. It was 5 intense pages that she wrote over 2 days, refining every paragraph, every argument. When Raphael found the third letter, he felt something beyond the intellectual gratitude the previous ones had provoked. There was a deep understanding there, not just of business, but of people. Whoever was writing this wasn't just a brilliant strategist. It was someone with a rare human sensitivity, someone who saw beyond numbers and operations. He spent the entire night rereading that letter, jotting down personal reflections in the margins. For the first time in years, Raphael found himself confronting not only the company's problems, but his own limitations as a leader. The anonymous voice was doing more than saving his business. It was transforming who he was. The letters began to arrive with bi-weekly regularity. The fourth focused on innovation and the need to create an internal ideas lab. The fifth addressed the importance of strategic partnerships with startups and tech companies. The sixth brought a detailed analysis of 3 specific clients who were dissatisfied and how to win them back. Each one was an unexpected gift that Raphael awaited with growing anxiety. As the months passed, Almeida and Associados not only stopped the bleeding of clients and revenue, but began to grow again. New contracts were signed, old clients returned. The company's reputation in the market, which had deteriorated considerably, began to recover. Raphael knew that all of this owed much, if not everything, to that mysterious voice that insisted on remaining anonymous. He tried everything to discover the author's identity. He installed discreet cameras in his office, but they never captured anything other than himself and the cleaning crew doing their routine work. He asked the building security to review the CCTV footage, but found nothing suspicious. He even discreetly hired a private investigator, who after 2 weeks returned the money and admitted to finding absolutely nothing. It was as if that person were a ghost, a benevolent ghost who insisted on saving him without asking for anything in return. Marina, for her part, lived with an increasingly intense internal conflict. On one hand, she felt fulfilled in a way she had never experienced before. Her life had always been marked by limitations, financial limitations that prevented her from studying, social limitations that kept her stuck in invisible jobs, limitations imposed by a system that judged people by appearance, by surname, by social position, never by real potential. But now, through those letters, she was proving to herself that she was capable, that her mind was worth as much as that of any consultant with a degree hanging on the wall. On the other hand, fear consumed her, fear of being discovered and ridiculed, fear that if her identity came to light, everything would collapse. Because how would people react to knowing that the cleaner was giving business strategy lessons to the company president? Would she be taken seriously, or would there be mockery? Would she be respected or humiliated? But there was something more, something Marina was reluctant to admit even to herself. She was developing feelings for Rafael Almeida. She didn't know him personally. She had never exchanged a word with him beyond polite, empty greetings when they crossed paths in the hallways. But she knew him in other ways. She knew his dedication, evident in the nights he spent at the office, even when everyone else had gone home. She knew his vulnerability, seen in the expressions of fatigue and despair he didn't hide when he thought he was alone. She knew his strength, manifested in the way he embraced the changes suggested in the letters, even while facing resistance. She saw him transform. She saw the dejected and insecure man give way to a more conscious, more human, stronger leader. And knowing she was part of that transformation created a strange, asymmetrical intimacy, where she deeply knew someone who didn't even know of her real existence. The 7th letter was different from the previous ones. Marina realized this while writing it in the early hours of a Saturday morning, unable to sleep. It had started like the others, with technical analyses on how to improve customer service. But as she wrote, different words began to flow, words of encouragement, recognition of how much Rafael had changed, of how much the company had grown. For the first time, the letter carried not just business strategies, but emotion. When Rafael read it the following Monday, he felt something change inside him too. He could no longer think of that voice as just an anonymous consultant. There was a real person there, with feelings, with an emotional investment in his and the company's success. And he found himself, for the first time, wishing to meet this person, not just out of professional gratitude, but out of a deeper need for connection. He did something he had never done before. He wrote a reply. He took a sheet of paper, sat at his desk, and hand-wrote a letter thanking them, expressing his gratitude, his admiration, his respect for that brilliant mind that had saved him from collapse. And at the end he made a plea. He asked the person to reveal themselves, promised he would never judge them, that he only wanted to meet them, thank them in person, perhaps even work together officially. He left the letter on the desk before leaving that night, hoping the mysterious benefactor would find it the same way their letters reached him. Marina found the reply while cleaning. When she saw the folded sheet on the desk with her name written only as, "To the person who saved me," her heart raced. She looked around, making sure she was completely alone on the floor, and then read it. Raphael's words touched her in a way she didn't expect. There was a raw sincerity there, a vulnerability he probably wouldn't show to anyone else. He wasn't just saying thank you. He recognized what those letters represented. He recognized that he was facing an exceptional intelligence, and he asked, almost begged, for the opportunity to know who was behind it. Marina tucked the letter into her uniform pocket, her hands shaking. She spent the rest of the night working on autopilot, her mind completely consumed by those words. When she got home, she reread the letter 10 times, and then she made a decision. She wrote a new letter, but this time it was even more personal. She explained, without revealing her identity, that she couldn't show herself, that there were barriers he didn't understand, prejudices he hadn't experienced, that she feared that upon knowing who she was, everything would change. Admiration would turn to condescension, respect would turn to pity. She said she preferred to remain anonymous, that it was enough, that seeing the company prosper was already a more than adequate reward. But she finished by saying something that surprised even herself. She said his words had meant more than he imagined, that she also felt connected to him in a strange and inexplicable way, that she followed his journey with an affection that went beyond the professional. They were the most honest words Marina had ever written in her life. Raphael found this response and was paralyzed. He read and reread that letter perhaps 20 times. There was a sadness there that tightened his chest. Barriers, prejudices. The person was afraid of judgment, and this made him reflect on himself, on the society they lived in, on the invisible structures of power and privilege that he had always taken for granted. More than that, there was the confession of a feeling. Connection, affection, words that echoed within him because they awakened something corresponding. Raphael realized with a sudden and disconcerting clarity that he also felt something for the author of those letters. Admiration, yes, gratitude, certainly, but also an intellectual and emotional attraction that defied the logic of never having met. How was it possible to feel this way about someone he didn't know? The company continued its recovery trajectory. 6 months after the first letter, Almeida and Associados had recovered 80% of the lost revenue. New clients were arriving. The team was more engaged. Raphael was recognized in the market as a leader who knew how to reinvent himself. Everyone asked what the secret of the turnaround had been. He always gave vague answers about strategic changes and client focus, but he knew the truth was much simpler and at the same time more complex. The secret was that invisible woman whose name he didn't know, whose face he had never seen, but who had become the most important person in his professional and increasingly personal life. The letters kept coming now with a different tone, less focused on specific strategies, more on reflections about leadership, values, purpose, and always carrying an emotional subtext that left Raphael restless and hopeful at the same time. He replied to each one, creating a strange epistolary dialogue between two strangers who, paradoxically, knew each other more deeply than most people who lived together daily. Marina knew that situation couldn't last forever. She knew that sooner or later, something would have to change. The intimacy they were building through those letters was becoming unsustainable. She wanted more. She wanted him to know who she was. She wanted to be able to talk to him for real, not just through words written on paper. But fear paralyzed her. Until one night, everything changed in a way neither of them could have predicted. It was a Thursday of torrential rain over São Paulo, when Marina arrived at work earlier than usual. The traffic was chaotic, buses were crowded, streets were flooded, but she had managed to leave home before the worst of it. She changed clothes in the locker room with the automatic movements of someone who has done it for years, but her mind was elsewhere. It was on the letter she carried folded in her bag, the 12th she would write to Raphael, and perhaps the most difficult of all. In that letter, Marina had allowed herself to be more vulnerable than ever. She had written about dreams she had never shared with anyone, about how she had always felt capable of much more than life had allowed her to achieve, about the frustration of having a mind that understood complex concepts, but a reality that kept her trapped in jobs that didn't demand even 10% of her capacity, and about how those letters, that connection with him, had become the point of light in an existence marked by invisibility. She was going up in the service elevator, the cleaning cart rattling slightly with each jolt, when she heard voices coming from the 12th floor hallway. She checked her watch. 10 p.m. Raphael didn't usually have meetings this late, but lately the company was so busy that normal hours had ceased to exist. Marina hesitated. Maybe it was better to leave the letter for another day. But then she thought she had carried those words inside her for too long. She needed to release them. She decided to wait for the meeting to end and the floor to empty. She stowed the cart in a discreet corner and began cleaning the lower floors, always keeping an ear out for the moment she could go up. Around 11 at night, she finally heard the sound of the main elevator descending with the people from the meeting. She waited another 15 minutes to be sure Raphael had also left, and then she went up. The floor was in darkness, except for the light in his office which remained on. Marina frowned. Was he still there? She approached slowly, trying to see through the glass walls. The office seemed empty. He had probably forgotten the light on. It happened frequently. She entered the office, the folded letter in her hand, ready to leave it in the usual place. That was when she heard his voice. "Can you bring me a coffee, please? It's in the machine over there." Marina froze. Raphael was sitting on the leather sofa in the corner of the office, an area not visible from the door. She hadn't seen him. He had his tie loosened, his shirt sleeves rolled up, a laptop on his lap, completely absorbed in some task. He hadn't looked up when he spoke, likely assuming she was one of the cleaning staff he was already used to seeing around. Marina quickly tucked the letter into her uniform pocket and went to the coffee machine, her hands shaking slightly. She prepared the drink, put it in the porcelain cup he used, and brought it to him. "Thanks," Raphael said, still without looking, taking the cup and returning his attention to the screen. "You can leave this room for last today. I'm going to stay a bit longer." "Yes, sir," Marina murmured, her voice coming out lower than she intended. She turned around to leave, her heart beating wildly. That was the man who had occupied her thoughts for months, the man for whom she wrote passionate letters under the guise of business consulting. And there she was serving coffee, invisible as always. The irony was cruel. She left the room and continued cleaning the floor, but she couldn't concentrate. Raphael was there, just a few meters away. For the first time, she had the opportunity to be close to him for longer than the casual encounters in the hallways. But this proximity only accentuated the real distance between them. Different worlds, different lives. After an hour, when she had already cleaned the whole floor, Marina went back into his office for the final cleaning. Raphael was still on the sofa, but now with his head leaned back, eyes closed, the laptop turned off beside him. For a moment, she thought he had fallen asleep. She began to clean as quietly as possible. "How long have you worked here?" His voice made her start. Marina turned. He was looking at her now, really looking, perhaps for the first time since she had started working there. "Almost 2 years, sir," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. 2 years. Raphael ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of exhaustion she had seen dozens of times through the glass walls. "And I never asked your name. I'm sorry for that." Marina Silva. "Raphael," he extended his hand, a tired smile on his lips. "But I think you already knew that." She shook his hand briefly, feeling an electric current run up her arm with that simple touch. "Everyone knows who you are. You can call me Raphael. Sir makes me feel old." He took a sip of the now cold coffee. "You must think it's strange, right? Me here at this hour, working when I should be at home." Marina didn't know what to say. She wanted to say she didn't think it was strange, that she perfectly understood why he stayed late, that she followed every step of the company's transformation and knew how much he dedicated himself, but she said only, "Everyone has their reasons." "That's true." Raphael was silent for a moment, looking at the empty cup. "The company went through some tough times. I think you must have noticed the movement, the changes, but we're getting out of the hole, finally." "I'm happy to hear that," Marina said, and it was the absolute truth, even if he couldn't understand how much those words meant coming from her. "You know what's funny? I spent so much time surrounded by expensive consultants, specialists with degrees hanging on the wall, and it was an anonymous person who saved everything." He stood up, went to the window, looking at the illuminated city outside, the rain still falling over São Paulo. "Someone who writes letters to me, incredible letters, full of insights that no one else could see, and I have no idea who it is." Marina felt her blood run cold. She was there, less than 3 meters from him, and he was talking about her without knowing it. The situation had an absurd cruelty. "That person must have their reasons for staying anonymous," Marina said, choosing each word carefully. "I'm sure they do, and I respect that, I really do. But I can't deny I'd like to meet them, to say thank you, I don't know." He turned to Marina, his eyes tired but sincere. "Sometimes I have the feeling that I already know this person better than I know most people in my life. It's strange, isn't it? Feeling intimacy with someone you've never seen." "I don't think it's strange," Marina said softly. "Sometimes we know people in ways that go beyond what we can see." Raphael looked at her more closely, as if really seeing her for the first time. "You are very perceptive, Marina. I observe a lot. It's part of the job." She looked away, fearing he might read something in her eyes. And I see that you've changed a lot in recent months, for the better. You noticed that? He seemed genuinely surprised. As I said, I observe. Marina picked up the cart, signaling she needed to go. I need to finish the cleaning, excuse me. Of course. Sorry for taking up your time. Raphael went back to the sofa, picking up the laptop again. Marina left the room with shaky legs. That brief conversation had shaken her more than she expected. Seeing Raphael up close, hearing his voice, feeling the sincerity in his words about the letters, about her, was at once wonderful and painful. She wanted to scream that she was right there, that he didn't need to look any further, that the person he so wanted to meet was inches away. But instead, she went down to the lower floors and finished her work in silence. That night, Marina couldn't leave the letter. She tucked it back into her bag and went home with a heavy heart. But the next night, when Raphael wasn't there, she finally placed it on his desk, along with an additional note. She said they had met recently without him knowing, that she had been close to him, and that it had made her realize how unsustainable the situation was, that she felt more and more like she was living a lie, even if a necessary one. Raphael read that letter on a Friday morning and was unsettled all day. They had met? When? How? He tried to remember everyone he had interacted with recently, but there were so many. Clients, suppliers, collaborators, people in the elevator, in the parking lot. It could be anyone. Or it could be someone he saw every day and never really noticed. He wrote another reply that night before leaving. He asked her not to disappear. He said that whoever she was, wherever she was, she had a place in his life. Not just professionally. He finally admitted in written words that he had developed feelings for her. Feelings that defied logic but were real. That he thought of her constantly. That he awaited each letter as if it were a precious gift. That he wanted to meet her, but if she preferred to remain anonymous, he would respect that as long as she didn't disappear completely. They were the most honest words Rafael Almeida had written in his entire life. Marina found that letter and cried for the first time in years. She cried for the injustice of being so close and yet so far. She cried for the feelings he expressed and which mirrored exactly what she felt. She cried because she knew that, sooner or later, the truth would come out, and she deeply feared what would happen when it did. The following weeks were of an almost unbearable emotional tension for both. The letters continued, increasingly personal, increasingly charged with feelings that neither could hide anymore. Raphael began to pay more attention to the people around him, trying to find clues. Marina found herself avoiding crossing paths with him in the hallways, afraid that something in her gaze would give her away, until one Tuesday afternoon the inevitable happened. Raphael was in his office with Beatriz, the secretary, reviewing the week's schedule. He needed to confirm an important meeting and wanted to send a specific email to a client. Beatriz was typing on her laptop, but needed to jot something down quickly. "Marina," Raphael called distractedly, seeing the cleaner pass by the hallway with her cart. "Can you come here for a second?" Marina entered the room, her heart already racing for no apparent reason. "Can you write this for me?" Raphael handed her a pen and paper. "I need you to note down the name of this company and the phone number. Beatriz has her hands full." He dictated the name and the number. Marina wrote with her clear and neat handwriting, the same one she had used for months in the letters. "There." She handed the paper back, her hands trembling imperceptibly. "Thanks," Raphael said, taking the paper without looking. Marina left quickly, feeling that something terrible and inevitable had just happened. Raphael continued the meeting with Beatriz, but something nagged at his mind. A few hours later, when he was alone, he picked up the paper with Marina's notes and looked more closely. The handwriting was familiar. Very familiar. With his heart starting to beat faster, he opened the drawer where he kept all the letters he had received. He placed the paper next to the first letter. He compared them. He compared them again. They were identical. Exactly identical. The same curves in the A's, the same slant in the S's, the same stroke in the numbers. Raphael sat heavily in his chair, the paper and the letter in his hands, the world spinning around him. Marina, the cleaner, the woman he saw almost every day and never really looked at, the invisible person who had saved his company, who had become the most important thing in his life. It was her. It had always been her. Raphael didn't sleep that night. He sat in his apartment in Hardim, Europa, the letters spread out over the living room coffee table, rereading each of them with a completely new gaze. Every word, every observation, every piece of advice took on a different dimension now that he knew where they came from. Marina Silva, the cleaner he greeted distractedly in the hallways, the woman who served coffee when he asked, who emptied his trash every night, who passed by him like a silent shadow. She was the brilliant mind behind those strategic analyses that saved his company. She was the person for whom he had developed deep feelings through words written on paper. The discovery affected Raphael in ways he hadn't anticipated. There was the obvious shock, the surprise of discovering that the person he was looking for had been so close all along. But there was also something else, something more disturbing that he was reluctant to admit. Shame, a deep and painful shame at his own blindness. How had he not seen her? How had he spent 2 years working in the same building as her, seeing her almost daily and never, not once, stopped to really look, to ask her name before that night, to recognize that there was a person there, not just a function? Raphael remembered all the times he had spoken about meritocracy, about how the right people always find their place, about how talent always emerges. Comfortable lies he told himself to justify his privileged position. Marina had more talent in her fingertips than half of his team of consultants with expensive degrees. And where had it led her? To cleaning offices at night. Not because she wasn't capable, but because the system, the same system from which he had benefited his whole life, didn't give her the opportunities it had given him automatically. He was born into a family with money, studied at the best schools, inherited a company. She, he imagined, had likely fought for every crumb of opportunity she had. And even so, she had saved him, without asking for anything in return, without expecting recognition, using her extraordinary intelligence not to take revenge on the injustice of the world, but to do good. Raphael ran a hand over his face, feeling the exhaustion and confusion. He needed to talk to her. But what? How? Anything he could say would sound condescending or, worse, fake. Thanks for saving my company? You're incredible despite being a cleaner. Every formulation that crossed his mind sounded horrible. Furthermore, there were the feelings he had confessed in the last letter he had left for her, feelings he had written believing they were for a professional colleague, perhaps an independent consultant, someone from his world. But now he knew they were for Marina. And did that change everything? Should it change? Raphael wanted to believe it didn't. He wanted to believe the feelings he had developed were for the person, the mind, the soul revealed in those letters, not for the social or professional position. But a cynical voice in his head whispered that it was easy to say that now after already having fallen in love. Would he have even noticed Marina under other circumstances? The honest answer shamed him. The next morning, Raphael arrived at the office earlier than ever. He wanted to be there when Marina arrived for the night shift, but realized he didn't know her exact schedule. He discreetly asked the building security, who informed him that the cleaning crew started at 7 in the evening. The day dragged on interminably. Raphael tried to work, but his mind was elsewhere. He participated in meetings without really hearing what was said. He signed documents without reading them properly. All his concentration was focused on 7 o'clock in the evening, when he could finally talk to her. But when the time came, Raphael discovered that Marina was not working. He asked the cleaning crew supervisor, who informed him that she had called in saying she was sick and could not attend. Sick, or running from him. Raphael had a strong suspicion it was the second option. Marina must have realized the moment he called her to write that note. She must have known he would find out. And now she was avoiding the inevitable confrontation. For 3 days, Marina didn't show up for work. Raphael learned she had submitted a medical certificate. He could have asked the cleaning company's human resources department for her address. He could have gone to her house. But that seemed too invasive, a violation of her space. Instead, he wrote another letter. But this time he didn't leave it on his desk. He asked the supervisor to deliver it personally to Marina, explaining that it was important. In the letter, Raphael was completely honest. He said he knew, that he had discovered the truth and that he understood why she had run away. He apologized for putting her in that situation, for not having seen before what had always been right before his eyes. He said the feelings he had expressed in the previous letter hadn't changed with the discovery of her identity. If anything, they had grown stronger, because now he saw the courage it took to do what she did. He finished the letter with a simple request, that she return not necessarily to work in cleaning, but to talk, that she give him the chance to make things right, that she not disappear without giving him the opportunity to know her for real. Marina received the letter at home, delivered by the supervisor with a curious expression. She waited for him to leave before opening it, her hands trembling so much that she partially tore the envelope. She read Raphael's words and felt tears run down her face. He knew. The worst thing she feared had happened. And yet, his words didn't carry the judgment or condescension she expected. There was sincerity there, vulnerability, even an apology that surprised her. But Marina couldn't just accept it. There was too much at stake. Her dignity, her sense of identity, her deepest fears of being reduced to an inspiring story of overcoming, the kind of narrative that upper-middle-class people love to tell at dinner parties to feel good about themselves. She didn't want to be Rafael Almeida's charity project. She didn't want him to feel obligated to help her out of guilt or gratitude. If there was to be something real between them, it had to be between equals, not between a benefactor and his beneficiary. For an entire week, Marina struggled with these thoughts. She talked to her mother, Donna Celia, who listened to everything with the silent wisdom of someone who had lived a whole life working hard. In the end, her mother only said, "Daughter, you are afraid he won't respect you, but it seems you are the one not respecting yourself. You saved his company. You are the smartest person I know. If he can't see that, it's his problem, not yours. But you need to give him the chance to prove he can." Donna Celia's words echoed in Marina for days, and then on a Monday night she went back to work. Raphael was in his office when he saw Marina pushing the cleaning cart down the 12th floor hallway. His heart raced. She had returned. He was paralyzed for a moment, not knowing what to do. Go to her. Wait. Call her. Marina made the decision for him. She stopped in front of his office's glass door and knocked lightly. "Come in," Raphael said, his voice coming out huskier than he intended. She entered, closing the door behind her. They stood there looking at each other, not knowing where to begin. All the dialogue they had built through letters for months disappeared in the face of the reality of being face to face, without the shield of written words. "So you came back," Raphael finally said. "I came back," Marina confirmed, keeping her distance. "I received your letter. And I came because I need you to understand one thing." Marina took a deep breath, gathering courage. "I don't want your pity. I don't want you to feel obligated to do anything for me out of gratitude or guilt. If you discovered who I am, and that changed how you see me, I'd rather you be honest about it." "It did change how I see you," Raphael admitted, and saw Marina shrink slightly. "But not in the way you're thinking. Before, I was in love with words on paper, with a faceless voice. Now, I'm seeing the real person behind those words, and that only makes everything more real, more intense." Marina shook her head. "You don't know me. You know the letters I wrote." "Then let me know you." Raphael took a step toward her. "Let me know the woman who had the courage to do what she did, who had the intelligence to see what no one else saw, who had the generosity to help without expecting anything in return." "I did expect something in return," Marina said softly. "I expected to see you well, to see the company survive, to see that I could make a difference, even being invisible. That wasn't generosity. It was disguised selfishness." "Then we are two selfish people," Raphael smiled for the first time. "Because I also want something. I want to know you. I want to understand how your mind works. I want to continue what we started through those letters, but in person, without masks." "You don't know what you're asking." Marina turned partially, looking out the window at the city outside. "I am a cleaner, Raphael. I live in a housing project in Zona Leste. I take 2 buses to get here. I support my sick mother and my siblings. I don't belong to your world." "So what?" The answer came faster and firmer than Raphael expected. "Do you think I care about that? Do you think any of that matters in the face of what you are capable of doing, of what you did?" "It will matter," Marina said with a sadness that broke his heart. "Maybe not to you, not now, but it will matter to the people around you, to your family, your friends, your co-workers, and eventually it will start to matter to you too." "You're wrong," Raphael said, but there was a tiny hint of doubt in his voice that Marina caught immediately. "Am I? Then tell me one thing. If I were an independent consultant with an office on Faria Lima, would you be hesitating to make me a professional proposal? Would you be worried about what people will think?" The silence that followed was eloquent. "That's what I thought," Marina said, picking up the cleaning cart. "Thank you for the honesty, Raphael, truly, but I need to go." "Wait." Raphael held her by the arm gently. "Please wait. You're right, I am a hypocrite. I've talked about meritocracy my whole life while benefiting from privileges I never earned. I spent 2 years working in the same building as you without ever really seeing you. I probably would think differently about making a professional proposal if you had formal credentials, even knowing you are more competent than most people with those credentials." Marina looked at him, surprised by the brutal frankness. "But that doesn't change the fact that I want to try," Raphael continued. "I want to overcome these prejudices. I want to be better than I've always been. And I need you for that, not just professionally, but personally. You made me see things about myself I never wanted to see. That's uncomfortable as hell, but it's also the most honest thing anyone has ever done for me." Marina felt the defenses she had built begin to crack. "And what about the letters? What about what you said you felt?" "It was true, it is true." Raphael looked into her eyes. "I fell in love with your mind first, the way you think, the way you see the world, and now that I know who you are, that has only gotten stronger. But I understand if you don't feel the same. I understand if—" "I feel the same," Marina interrupted, her voice almost a whisper. "I always have, since the first reply you gave me. But I'm afraid, Raphael. I'm afraid this is a fantasy that will crumble when it faces reality." "Then let's face reality together," Raphael said. "No fantasies, no illusions, just the truth, however difficult it may be." Marina remained in silence for a long moment, the weight of the decision pressing on her shoulders. Then finally she nodded. "All right, let's try." The following weeks were an exercise in navigating unknown territories for both. Raphael and Marina began to meet outside the office, away from the curious eyes that would inevitably arise if someone saw them together. Discreet coffee shops in Villa Maddalena, parks in the late afternoon, a small bookstore downtown that stayed open late. Places where they could talk without interruptions, without judgment. And they talked. They talked about everything. Raphael discovered that Marina had a passion for literature that rivaled her understanding of business. She read voraciously, everything she could borrow from the public library or find in second-hand shops. Machado de Assis, Clarice Lispector, but also Peter Drucker, Clayton Christensen, business strategy authors she studied with the dedication of an academic, even without ever having set foot in a university. Marina, for her part, discovered that Raphael was much more than the successful businessman everyone saw. He had deep insecurities, marked by his father's premature death and the weight of carrying a family legacy. He had a complicated relationship with his sister Marcella, who loved him but didn't understand the pressures he faced. And he had a loneliness he had never admitted to anyone, the loneliness of someone surrounded by people but feeling that no one really saw him. "It's funny," Raphael said one night as they walked through Ibirapuera Park after he had left work. "You felt invisible because people looked at you and saw only a cleaner. I felt invisible because people looked at me and saw only the CEO, the heir, the surname. In the end, neither of us was really being seen. But now we are seeing each other," Marina said softly, and for the first time since they had begun meeting in person, she intertwined her fingers with his. Raphael stopped walking, looked at their joined hands and felt something shift inside him. He pulled Marina close and kissed her, right there in the middle of the park, not caring who might see. It was a long, intense kiss, full of all the feelings they had built, through months of letters and weeks of honest conversations. When they pulled apart, Marina had tears in her eyes. "What is it?" Raphael asked, worried. "I never thought this was possible," she said. "I never thought someone like you could see someone like me this way." "Someone like me?" Raphael shook his head. "Marina, you saved my company. You are the smartest person I've ever met. You have a courage I can only aspire to. When are you going to stop seeing yourself as someone like you and start seeing yourself as you really are? When the world stops seeing me as a cleaner, Marina replied with brutal honesty. And there was the heart of the problem, because as much as they saw each other, as real as that connection was, there was a world out there that wouldn't change its perception so easily. Raphael knew that at some point he would need to tell people about Marina. Not necessarily about their relationship, that could wait, but about her role in saving the company, about who was really behind those letters that transformed everything. But when he imagined that conversation, especially with the board members, he felt a knot in his stomach. How would they react? Would they humbly thank a cleaner for saving them? Or would they feel their egos bruised, their competence questioned? Marina had different but equally valid concerns. She continued working in cleaning because she needed the money. Her mother, Donna Calia, had diabetes and needed expensive medication. Her younger siblings were still studying. Marina was the family's breadwinner, and leaving her job without having something concrete in its place was not an option. But working at Almeida and Asociados was becoming increasingly difficult emotionally. Seeing Raphael every day, maintaining the necessary professional distance when what she wanted was to be near him, pretending to be just another employee when she knew she had saved that company, all of this took a toll. It was on a Saturday afternoon, during a quiet lunch at a small restaurant in Pinheiros, that Raphael finally made the proposal he had been architecting for weeks. "I want you to work with me," he said. "Not as an external consultant, as a partner, a business partner with a real stake in the company." Marina almost choked on her wine. "What? You saved Almeida and Asociados," Raphael continued, taking her hand over the table. "It wasn't just temporary consulting. You fundamentally changed the way the company operates, and I need that perspective continually, not just in occasional letters. I need you in the room when we make strategic decisions. I need your mind working with me, not at a distance." "Raphael, I don't have a university degree. I don't have formal experience. I don't have—" "You have everything that matters," he interrupted. "You have strategic vision. You have the courage to tell hard truths. You have the ability to see what no one else sees. You don't learn that in university. That is who you are." Marina pulled her hand back, her mind racing. "And your team, your directors. How do you think they'll react when they find out you're bringing the cleaner in as a partner?" "They'll have to accept it," Raphael said with a firmness that surprised her. "And if they don't accept it, they can leave, because this is my company, and I decide who is part of it, and you deserve to be there more than any of them." "But I'm not ready," Marina said, and there was real panic in her voice now. "I've read books, I've observed, but I've never led anything. I've never been in a boardroom. I've never presented a proposal to a client. How do you expect me to—" "No one is born ready for these things, Marina. I wasn't ready when I took over the company after my father died. I learned by doing, and you will learn too. The difference is that you have the intelligence and vision that most people will never have, with or without training." Marina was silent, looking at the plate of food she had barely touched. The proposal was tempting. It was everything she had secretly dreamed of during years of invisibility. But it was also terrifying. "I need to think," she said finally. "How much time do you need?" "I don't know, days, weeks. I need to talk to my family. I need to understand what this would mean. "I understand," Raphael said. "But while you think, I want you to know one thing. This isn't charity. It's not gratitude disguised as opportunity. It's an investment in the most valuable person I could have by my side in this company. And if you accept, I will create a structure that allows you to grow at your own pace. Formal education if you want it. Mentoring. Whatever it is you need to feel confident." Marina looked at him, seeing the absolute sincerity in his eyes. "And what about us? What if this doesn't work out between us personally? Won't the professional situation become impossible?" "I won't lie and say it wouldn't be complicated," Raphael admitted. "But I'd rather risk the complication than lose you in either way, professionally or personally." That night, Marina went home with her head spinning. She sat in the small living room of the apartment with her mother and told her everything. The discovery, the meetings with Raphael, the proposal. Donna Celia listened in silence as she always did. When Marina finished, She stayed quiet for a long moment before speaking. "You are afraid," she said simply. "I'm terrified," Marina admitted. "Afraid of what exactly?" "Of failing, of not being good enough, of discovering that everything I thought I knew is nothing but an illusion, of being humiliated, of being seen," Donatella completed. "You spent your whole life complaining about being invisible. Now someone is offering to put you in the spotlight, and you are terrified." Marina opened her mouth to deny it, but realized her mother was right. That was exactly it. Invisibility was safe. No one could judge you if they didn't see you. No one could make you feel inferior if you were already in the lowest place. "Daughter," Donatella held Marina's hand, "I spent my whole life cleaning rich people's houses. I saw up close how those people live, how they think. And do you know what I learned? Most of them are no smarter than you. They don't work harder than you. They just had opportunities you never had. Now someone is offering an opportunity, a real opportunity, and you're going to waste it out of fear. And if I accept and fail?" "Then you fail," Donatella said with simplicity. "And you learn from it, and you try again, or you try something else. But at least you tried. At least you didn't spend the rest of your life wondering, what if?" Marina hugged her mother, feeling tears run down. Donatella was right, of course, she always was. During the following week, Marina struggled with the decision. She researched executive training, adult education programs, everything that could help her prepare for what Raphael was offering. And the more she researched, the more she realized something important. She didn't need to be perfect. She didn't need to know everything. She just needed to be willing to learn, to grow, to accept that she would have a learning curve. And if there was one thing her life had taught her, it was how to learn. How to absorb information, how to adapt, how to overcome obstacles. On a Thursday night, Marina asked to meet Raphael. They met in the same park where they had kissed for the first time. She was nervous, her hands sweating, her heart racing. "I accept," she said as soon as she saw him. "I accept the proposal, but with conditions." Raphael smiled. "Which ones?" "First, I want to do this the right way. I want to study, to prepare. I'm not going in as a partner tomorrow. I want a transition period where I can learn the parts of the business I don't know yet." "I completely agree." "Second, I want my entry to be transparent. No lies about who I am or where I came from. If we're going to do this, we do it with total honesty." "I agree with that too." "Third," Marina took a deep breath, "I want it to be clear to everyone, including you, that I'm doing this for myself. Not because I'm dating you, not because you offered it to me, but because I deserve to be there, because I earned that place." Raphael pulled her close. "You more than earned it, you saved that place." "Then it's decided," Marina said, and for the first time in weeks she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope, real hope that her life could be more than it had always been, that she could be more. "There's one more thing," Raphael said, taking something from his pocket. It wasn't a ring box, Marina noticed with relief. It was a keychain, a simple keychain with a key. "It's the key to the office," he explained. "You're not going in as a cleaner anymore. From now on, you go in as an owner of the place, because that's what you are." Marina took the key, feeling the weight of the metal in her palm. It was so small, but it represented such an immense change, a portal between two worlds, two lives, two versions of herself. "I'm afraid," she admitted. "Me too," Raphael said. "But I'm more excited than afraid, and you should be too." And for the first time, Marina let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, he was right. The transition was not easy. Raphael knew it wouldn't be, but even so he underestimated the magnitude of the reactions that would come. When he called an extraordinary meeting with the entire board of Almeida and Associados to make the announcement, the tension in the room was palpable from the first minute. "I want to introduce someone," he began, and Marina entered the boardroom. No longer in the navy blue cleaning uniform she had worn for 2 years, but in a simple business suit she and her mother had carefully chosen at a department store, spending more than they could, but knowing that moment required it. She was nervous. She felt her hands shaking slightly, but she kept her head high, her shoulders back, refusing to look intimidated. The silence that followed was deafening. Some directors recognized her immediately, their eyes widening in shock as they processed the image of that woman they saw in the hallways every night, always pushing a cleaning cart. Others took a few seconds, but the expression of surprise was universal. "This is Marina Silva," Raphael continued, his voice firm and without hesitation. "And she is the person who saved this company. The letters I received in recent months, those strategic analyses we implemented, and that pulled us out of the crisis, the recommendations that transformed our approach and recovered our revenue, absolutely all came from her. Marina has a business understanding that rivals anyone in this room, and as of today, she will be my partner with a significant shareholding in the company." The explosion of reactions was immediate. Several voices speaking at once, some incredulous, others clearly indignant, all processing the impossibility of what they had just heard. Rodrigo Tavares, the financial director, a man in his 50s with 3 decades of experience and 2 MBAs hanging on the wall of his office, was the most direct and blunt. "Raphael, with all due respect, and you know I've always had the utmost respect for you and your father, but this is madness. She was the cleaner, for God's sake. You can't just—" "I can and I will," Raphael cut in with a hardness that surprised even Marina. She had never seen him like this, so inflexible, so unshakable in his conviction. This company was failing under our collective management. Our management with all the degrees and all the experience we think are so important. And it was Marina who saw what we were doing wrong, who showed us the way back to relevance. If you have a problem with that, with her presence here, then the door is open. You can leave now." A heated debate followed that lasted 2 hours. When someone directly questioned her competence, Marina finally spoke. And when she spoke, there were no doubts. She dissected every strategy she had suggested in the letters, explained the reasoning, demonstrated deep knowledge of clients, market trends, and management principles. She spoke for 20 minutes, and when she finished, the room was in complete silence. "Any other questions?" Marina said, and for the first time her voice carried quiet authority. There were no more questions. The meeting ended with tense acceptance. Rodrigo resigned a week later. Raphael accepted without trying to convince him to stay, but others embraced the change. Paula Mendez, the operations director, sought Marina out privately. "I want to apologize. I passed you hundreds of times and never saw who you were. If you're willing, I'd like to learn from you." Gradually, as Marina participated in meetings and demonstrated her value repeatedly, the resistance diminished. Raphael kept his promise about preparation. He hired executive coaches, paid for online courses, arranged mentorships. Marina absorbed everything with the same veracity with which she had always read books during her cleaning nights. The relationship had to be managed with care. They decided to keep it private at first, but it was hard to hide the connection. It was Marcela, Raphael's sister, who confronted the subject. "You're in love with her," Marcela said. Raphael didn't deny it. "I am." "And she with you?" "Yes." Marcela was silent. "People will talk. They'll say you're having an affair with an employee, that she's a gold digger." "Let them talk," Raphael said firmly. "I spent too much time worrying about what people think. And where did that lead me? Almost to bankruptcy and an empty life. Marina showed me there's another way to live, more honest, more real, and I'm not going to give that up for fear of gossip." Marcela smiled. "You've changed, brother, for the better." It was thanks to her. 6 months after Marina joined as a partner, Almeida and Asociados had not only recovered lost ground but was growing above projections. New clients were arriving. The team was more engaged, and much of that was due to Marina's influence. She brought a perspective that was missing. She understood clients in a way traditional consultants couldn't. They went public with the relationship when someone photographed them together and the speculation became impossible to ignore. The reaction was mixed. Tabloids ran sensationalist stories, but there was also support. Other women shared stories of overcoming. Businessmen praised the courage. On a Friday night, after everyone had gone, Raphael and Marina were alone in the office. She was reviewing a proposal. He was watching the city through the window. "What are you thinking about?" Marina asked. Raphael turned. "I was thinking about how strange life is. A year ago I thought I had lost everything. And now I have a thriving company, a brilliant partner, and the woman I love by my side, thanks to an anonymous letter. Marina went to him. It wasn't just the letter. You had to be willing to listen, to change, to accept help from where you least expected it. And you had to have the courage to write, to risk, to step out of invisibility. We both took risks, Marina said, and it was worth it. Raphael kissed her. When they pulled apart, he said, "Marry me?" Marina froze. What? You heard me. I don't have a ring right now. I can do this properly later, but I can't wait. Marina Silva, will you marry me? Marina felt tears. She thought about the whole journey. The poor girl who never had opportunities. The young woman who worked in invisible jobs. The woman who educated herself. The anonymous author who saved a company. The partner who earned her place. And now the woman loved by a man who learned to see beyond surfaces. Yes, she said, smiling through the tears, yes, I will. The wedding 3 months later was small and intimate. Not the big social party expected, but a simple celebration with those who mattered. Donna Celia cried throughout the ceremony. Marcela was the maid of honor, having become friends with Marina. The Almeida and Associados team was there. Paula Mendez made a toast. To the most unlikely couple in São Paulo, who taught us that talent has no degree, that love has no social class, and that the best things come from where we least expect them. Marina looked around, at the people gathered, at Raphael by her side holding her hand, at her mother smiling, and she felt immense gratitude for having had the courage to write that first letter. Almeida and Associados continued to grow under joint leadership. They complemented each other perfectly. He had the connections, the formal experience. She had the strategic vision, the ability to see patterns. Together, they transformed the company into something greater. But more than professional success, they built a life based on honesty and respect. A life where they didn't need to hide who they were, where intelligence was valued regardless of credentials, where love transcended social barriers. Years later, with 2 children and the company stronger than ever, Raphael occasionally returned to that room where it all began. He opened the drawer where he kept the letters Marina had written. He reread them, remembering that period of transformation. "Are you rereading the letters again?" Marina would ask, finding him. "I can't help it. They changed my life." "It wasn't the letters," Marina would correct, kissing him. "It was us. We who had the courage to believe it could be different, to fight for what we wanted, even when the world said it was impossible." She was right. In the end, it wasn't the letters that saved Raphael and his company. It was 2 people who refused to accept limitations imposed by society, who chose to see beyond surfaces, who had the courage to risk for something real. And when people asked Raphael what the secret of Almeida and Associados' renewed success was, he always gave the same answer. "I learned to see what was always there. I learned that the answers are rarely where we expect them. I learned that ignoring someone because of their position is ignoring infinite possibilities. But mainly I learned to listen, really listen." And Marina would add, "And I learned that being invisible doesn't mean being powerless. That knowledge doesn't need external validation. That courage sometimes means just taking the first step. And that true love happens when 2 people decide to see each other exactly as they are, without masks. Just humans trying to build something good together. Because in the end, that is exactly what they did. 2 strangers who found each other through words in the silence of the night, who dared to cross social chasms, who faced prejudices, who overcame fears, all to build something that neither